again, fifth graders, so you looked at simplifying fractions for your last lesson, and now we're going to look at multiplying fractions. Yay! So for letter A, I have 1/4 times 3. All right. Now another way to say this, just so you know, when you see this multiplication sign, you might sometimes see the word of, and you're asked to find 1/4 of 3. I just wanted to make sure you understood that that means the same exact thing as 1/4 times 3. I, of course, am going to start with a picture because a picture is worth 1,000 words. I probably have said more than 1,000, I'm sorry. So if I have 1/4 of 3, I'm going to have 3 whole amounts here. So 1, 2, 3. 3 whole, right? Now if I want to know 1/4 of the 3, guess how many pieces each whole has to be divided up into? You don't have to guess. All you have to do is look at your denominator. This is 1/4. 4 is my denominator. That means each whole is broken up into 4 pieces. Now if I have 1/4 of those 3, or 1/4 3 times, that would mean I have 1/4 here, I have 1/4 here, I have 1/4 here. So this means 1/4 3 times. So what do I have? Well, my denominator is the number of pieces each whole is cut up into. Is each whole cut up into 12 pieces? 4, 8, 12? No. Each whole square is cut up into 4 pieces. So that's my denominator. My numerator is the number of pieces that I'm counting, or the number of pieces that are shaded, which is 1, 2, 3. So 1/4 times 3, or 1/4 of 3, is equal to 3/4. Another way to look at multiplication is as repeated addition, right? So if I say I have 1/4 times 3, that means I'd have 1/4 3 times. So I could also look at that as 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. And our picture shows us that. That's how we got 3/4 in the first place, right? Because when you're adding fractions with like denominators, all we have to do is count the number of pieces in my numerator, 1, 2, 3. And my denominator, the number of pieces the whole's cut up into, doesn't change. So you can look at this pictorially, meaning with a picture, pictorial, picture, makes sense. You can look at this as repeated addition. 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. Either way, we're going to get 3/4, okay? I'm going to use that same method for this next one. If I have 2/3 times 4, or 2/3 of 4, that means I would have 4 whole amounts. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Squares are just the easiest for me. So you could use circles, you could use whatever. And if I have 2/3 of 4, that means that each of these is going to be cut up into 3 pieces. My denominator tells me how many pieces each whole is cut up into. So I'm going to cut each whole up into 3 pieces. Now, this is saying that I have 2/3 of 4. This means I have 2/3 4 times. So I have 2 out of 3 here, 2 out of 3 here, 2 out of 3 here, and 2 out of 3 here. So when we look at, okay, how much do I have? Well, the number of pieces that are shaded are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 8 pieces out of, it's not 3, 6, 9, 12. It's how many pieces the whole is broken up into. So my denominator should be 3. So that's 8/3. Now maybe some of you are looking at that and you're like, oh, wait a minute, Mrs. Tremblay, that is improper. I remember us talking about improper and we need to change that to a mixed number. You are exactly correct. So to make this a mixed number, I'm going to take this 8/3, and I'm going to ask myself, how many times does 3 divide into 8? Well, I can fit 2 3s into 8, 3, 6. And there are 2 left over. To get from 6 to 8, I have 2 left over out of 3. So 2 2/3 is the best way to say that. 8/3 is correct. If you're looking at this and you're like, I don't understand, where did you get that from? How did you do that? Well, if I have 8/3, I can move some pieces. I think that'll help. Let's say I take this piece right here and I fill it in here. And then I'm going to take this piece right here and fill it in there. So I took care of that, right? That's done. What I actually have left now is I have 2 whole and 2/3 of 1 more. which is what this says, 2 2/3. The way we learn to do that in class is to take 8 divided by 3, and 3 goes into 8 twice. 8 minus 6 is 2, and the denominator never changes. Okay, let's look at another one. This one is a little different. It is 1/4 times 1/2. So I'm going to show you the visual model of this because, believe it or not, yes, there is a visual model for this. So I want 1/4 of 1/2. I could also look at this as 1/2 of 1/4 because the commutative property works for multiplication. So I'm going to start off and I'm going to draw 1/2 because here I drew 4 holes. I'm going to draw 1/2. So that's easy enough. I have 1 hole. I'm going to cut it in half and I shade 1 piece. Now I want 1/4 of that. Okay, I want 1/4 of that. So now what I need to do is I need to figure out what 1/4 of that is. So if I have 1/4, that means I need to divide into 4 pieces. So I'm going to look at this kind of sideways when I do that. I think it's a little bit easier. And I'm going to cut this into 4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And I want to shade 1/4 of those. So what I did was I basically put 1/4 and 1/2 within the same hole because I want to take 1/4 of that half. Now, to find my answer, it's basically where these pieces overlap. So when I look at this, I see that this piece right here is the only one that is shaded with both colors. So when I count to find my answer, I would say I have 1 out of, how many pieces is this entire thing divided up into now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1/4 of a half is 1/8. 1/4 of a half is 1/8. Okay, for letter D, 2/3 times 4/5. 2/3 times 4/5. All right, are you ready? I'm going to take this and I'm going to divide it up. If I want 2/3 of 4/5, I'm going to divide up a whole into 5 pieces. So I'll do my best to make them the same size. Not too bad. All right, so this is fifths. I want to show 4/5. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want to know what 2/3 of 4/5 is. So I'm going to put 2/3 on this same diagram. I'm going to turn my paper and show 2/3 the opposite way. So that means I am going to divide this up into 3 sections, and I want to shade 2 of those sections. So I've shaded 2 of the sections. Now, to find my answer, I need to know where they overlap. That's how I can find 2/3 of 4/5. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces are shaded out of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. So the answer to 2/3 times 4/5 is 8/15. Now you might be thinking, Mrs. Tremblay, these problems are going to take us forever if we draw a picture for every single one. Yeah, I think they might. So there's a shortcut that we can find. All you need to do is look for patterns. It helps a lot. So right here, if I have 1/4 times 3, we ended up getting 3/4, right? I'm going to rewrite this underneath. 1/4 times 3, we said equals 3/4, right? Now this 3, how much is that 3 worth? It's worth 3 whole, right? To write a whole number as a fraction, I put a 1 underneath it, right? Because 3/1 is the same value as 3. Now take a look at this. This is really cool. What can I do with 1 and 3 to get 3? And what can I do with 4 and 1 to get 4? If you said multiply them, you're correct. 1 times 3 is 3, 4 times 1 is 4. So 1/4 times 3, 3/4. Now look at the next one. 2/3 times, and 4, I can write that as 4/1. And we said that that was equal to 8/3. 2 times 4 is 8, and 3 times 1 is 3. So in this one, I multiplied my numerators, I multiplied my denominators, I got my answer. And this one, I multiplied my numerators, I multiplied my denominators, I got my answer. Look at the next one. What is 1 times 1? It's 1. What is 4 times 2? 8. And look at our example D. 2 times 4, 8. 3 times 5, 15. So really all you have to do is multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, and make sure your answer is in simplest form. And we talked about how to simplify in our previous lesson. So just make sure you're always writing your answer in simplest form. And you might be thinking, well, why didn't you just tell us that, Mrs. Tremblay? Well, I don't want you to memorize a rule because there's so many rules in math. I want you to understand. You can look at this as the repeated addition. I want you to see that picture in your mind. So if you forget, what's that rule again? You can draw it out and really have an understanding of the math. That's always been the goal. So there's 2 left here. If you want, you can write them down and try them yourself. You can pause me now and then see if you got it right afterwards, or you can just work through right with me if you feel like, I'm not quite ready for that yet. First off, when I see a whole number and I'm trying to multiply fractions, I want to make sure that each of them is written as a fraction. Right now, 6 is written as a whole number. To write it as a fraction, all I need to do is put a 1 under it, because 6/1, 6 divided by 1, is 6. It's the same value. Once I have it set, all I have to do is multiply my numerators. 1 times 6 is 6. Multiply my denominator. 7 times 1 is 7. And you're done. 1/7 times 6 is 6/7. And if you think about it, if you have 1/7 6 times, it is 6/7. There's not a number that divides into 6 and 7 other than 1, so I know it's simplest form and we're good. All right, last one. 5/6 times 1/3. 5 times 1 is 5. 6 times 3 is 18. There is not a number other than 1 that divides into 5 and 18. So that's in simplest form and you're done. So the moral of the lesson for today, when you're multiplying fractions, make sure that they're both written as fractions. If it's a whole number, put a 1 under it. You multiply across the top, the numerators. Multiply across the bottom, the denominators. And make sure it's in simplest form. See you later.